Welcome back to Grace Stories. This is Garrett from Grace Community Church. We're really glad that you're listening, watching, and if you haven't yet, please subscribe. Please, give us ratings wherever you're listening to this, or if you're watching it, give us likes. It helps more people see these things. And then also, obviously don't forget to share them. These have been doing pretty well. We want them to reach more people to get to hear some of these stories. And also, if you've got ideas of things we can do or things you want us to talk about in the future, let us know, email us, leave comments, whatever it is. And this week, we have Daniel Lopez. He is our student ministry director. Daniel and I actually went to college together for a little bit, and we want to talk about some different things. I wanted to ask him a little bit, finishing up his first year of full-time vocational ministry, and what some of that's been like, what some of the surprises have been, what some of the expectations were. And just to start out, Daniel, for people that don't know, just explain kind of what drew you to ministry, and then what the process looked like for you coming to Grace.
Okay, sweet. Well, Garrett, thanks for having me here. I guess I should start with how I got to Oklahoma Wesleyan first, which is the college you and I graduated from. And so in high school, I played golf pretty religiously. My dad kind of said, if you're practicing or you're working at something, don't worry about a job. I'll take care of you financially, as long as you're putting forth effort into something that can get you a scholarship or take you to college or help pay for school. Mm-hmm. And so my senior year of high school, I think it was about March. So about March, I still hadn't gotten an offer for a scholarship. And at this point, I had pretty much settled on just going to a D2 university down the road from where I lived. We had put my name out on this recruiting website, and paid money to do so. It was real sketchy. I felt like we were giving our money to some dude in a basement. But we paid this company to advertise my skills and my, resume of performances. And I got a phone call from a golf coach at Oklahoma Wesleyan University, and I was like, Oklahoma Wesleyan? I don't know what that even means. What is a Wesleyan? And I was also like, where's Bartlesville? There's two things I've never even heard of before. I grew up in West Texas in a little cow town, so these are all new things for me. And I went to Oklahoma Wesleyan. I came up on a Saturday. The golf coach showed me one of the rooms of the golfers, and the dude was passed out in his bed, and his room looked like a tornado had hit. It was terrible. It was so messy. But I walked in, and I was like, huh. So this is college life. And then I walked around the campus, but that campus really kind of drew me in. So I started asking questions about what the school life was like and what it was like to be a student here. What do the golfers do? What majors are they in? Because I wanted to kind of fit into that clique, because for me, that's all I knew was golfers. Mm-hmm. So I got there and got to a point where I had to pick a major to kind of register for courses. Mm-hmm. So I went ahead and registered as a business accountant. And that was what I was going to do, because I had taken 2 years of accounting in high school. So I had some kind of experience, and I was like, well, I can do math. I can do numbers. I can survive that. Mm-hmm. So I was set. I was like, I'm going to go into business accounting. I sat down with an advisor. I got my schedule laid out, and I was like, we're good to go. It came time to move. I moved into the dorms. And it was that Monday before classes start, when people are walking around, finding their classes and taking care of last minute things. And they had a chapel service. And I remember sitting in that chapel service and thinking about, the School of Business and the classes and the people I was going to be in class with and the work I was going to be doing. And I just had this feeling that I wasn't called to that. It was this feeling of, it's like a voice in my head told me, that's not why I made you. And so I started to ask questions of myself, am I happy? Why am I going into accounting? Why am I going into the School of Business? And then I started asking more questions, and I got to this point where I was like, what about ministry? Like, is ministry something I could consider as a vocation? Because in my mind at that point, it was what's going to make money for me.
Which isn't ministry.
Which isn't ministry. I was like, what can I do to make money, to have a family, and to sustain that family?
Mm-hmm.
And ministry was not on that list. But I started asking myself, well, what if ministry is meant for more than just the money?
Mm-hmm.
Which it has to be, because there's not money in this.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay, here's what I'll do. I'm going to go talk to the dean, which is Dr. Weeder at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to ask him some questions about transferring from the School of Business to the School of Ministry. So I walked into Weeder's office, and he was sitting in his chair with his little Ohio State plush couch on his desk, and Weeder kind of spins towards me, kind of like, what's his name? Dr. Burns in The Simpsons. He looks like him, and he spins towards me, and he puts his hands together, and he says, so you saw the light, huh? And so I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, you're transferring from the School of Business. You want to transfer into ministry. You saw the light. And I was like, yeah, I guess. I don't know. So I went ahead, filled out the papers. He got assigned as my dean, or as my advisor. So I was in pastoral ministry, theology, those sorts of things. And the next day was my first class. And funny enough, my first class was with you. Mm-hmm. My first college class was with Garrett in Dr. Yarmola's course. And I heard this, I don't know if it was a joke or a piece of advice or what it was, but somebody said, if you sit in your college course and you can't understand the words that are coming out of your professor's mouth because of an accent or something, you need to leave that class. And Dr. Yarmola walks in, and he's Polish. He's from Poland. And he starts speaking, and I'm like, oh no, I'm having trouble understanding his words.
Might be harder than what you thought.
Yeah, I was starting to get worried. I was like, oh no, this class is going to be so hard. In the long run, I passed the courses. I got the degree. I took Greek for 4 semesters. So I survived the hard stuff, excluding a few Weeder classes, but I survived most of the hard stuff. And throughout that process, I started volunteering here at Grace. Another person we went to school with, his name is Caleb. He introduced me to Adam, who was the youth director, youth pastor. He was a youth pastor before I was here. And I met Adam, and I saw what he was about. He was about relationships. He was about connecting, and he put the well-being of the students ahead of the messages, which I thought was kind of backwards. I thought, well, if you're a minister, you're supposed to be bringing Jesus first. And in some weird way, he was doing that in a way that I hadn't thought of. He was being Jesus to them by being Jesus and not by telling them about Jesus, which I thought was really different, and I liked it. So as I stayed and I volunteered with Adam, he and I grew closer and closer, and he started to ask more and more of my time and my abilities to help him and to serve him in that way. And there was one point where I was volunteering Sunday morning during the youth class, Sunday afternoon during middle school small groups, and then Wednesday night for high school small groups. So he had me volunteering three times a week, no pay, but I did it because I felt like I was learning something, and I felt like I had an obligation to the church I was attending to serve that church and to do what it was asked of me. Adam was my spiritual leader, and I wanted to serve my spiritual leader. And through that process, I think Adam and I made a connection that led him to put my name in the running whenever he announced that he was going to leave. When he was going to Africa, he told me, hey, you need to apply for this job here. And so I was kind of hesitant because I was like, well, 1, I don't know if I want to stay. 2, I don't know if they'll accept me. And 3, I'm not qualified. Like, I'm not cool enough to be a youth director. And so I had a lot of doubts. I actually walked into my first interview with the board of elders and Rod and Sean and a few parents. I walked into that first interview in a full suit, full gray suit with a blue shirt and a tie and everything. I walked in. I was 10 minutes early. I sat down in the conference room, and I sat there for about 5 minutes, and then Rod walked in, and he was wearing like a sweater vest and like jeans, like his like vest that he wears with his flannel shirt and jeans. And I was like, oh no, I'm way out of place here. And then Chuck walks in, and a few other elders walked in, and one of them, I think it was either David or Jeff. They sit next to me and they say, well, I've never seen a youth pastor come for a job interview dressed in a suit before. And in my head, I was playing over this argument that I had with my mom. I said, well, Mom, I'm going to apply for a youth pastor position. I don't need a suit. If you saw what the youth pastor wore, the suit's way overdone. Like, I could just wear a button-up shirt and a pair of jeans. And she's like, no, you have to wear a suit. You have to dress to impress. You want the job. Be serious about it. And she got on to me. So I did all of those things. And I think the elders kind of laughed about it. And they felt like it kind of broke the ice in some weird way. Mm-hmm. And so throughout that whole process, I met with Rod a few times. I met with Sean a few times outside of church hours. They took me to lunch, had conversations with them. And it was that process lasted from about November until March. And then in March, they had left and gone on a staff retreat or a like a retreat for elders.
There's lots of things, lots of retreats and different things like that.
So they had left for a weekend, and Sean had said, well, you'll hear back from us after this weekend had passed. I knew there was a different person in the running, so there were two of us that I knew of. Mm-hmm. So Sean said, you'd hear back from me after this weekend had passed. So I said, okay, well, I'll just sit here and wait. I don't really know what else to do. And then a few days later, he called me and said, we want to extend you the position. We want to officially offer you the position of youth director. And I wanted to say yes right away, like just say, all right, I'll start Monday. But I took a breath and I said, let me make some phone calls first and pray about it, and I'll get back to you. So I called Mom. I told her, hey, they want me. They offered the position. Mm-hmm. They said they want me to be their youth director. And she was like, well, that's great. But I could hear in her voice, she was like, but you're not going to come home? When do you start? Next year? Mm-hmm. So I said, no, I would start full-time in June. June 1 would be my first full-time day. So I'd work part-time up until then. And she's like, well, what about graduation? And what about coming home in summer and blah, blah, blah? Like, can you start in August? I said, nope, that's not how it works. So I took that weekend. Addie and I talked about it. She said, well, obviously this isn't my choice. This is your choice. It's your position. But, let's pray about it. And if this is what God wants for you, then I think he'll make a sign for you. And it was like a dream that I had where I had this connection with one student. And I don't know who the student was or what they looked like, but there was just this connection between the two of us. And I saw that student grow up and go and be a spiritual leader in a different place. Mm. And for me, I was like, if I get to have this position and do that for one teenager, then that means this is where I'm supposed to be. So from the beginning, it hasn't been about big numbers or fun or parties or any of those things, but it's been about training up students to go out and be workers for Christ, mm-hmm. to be examples in the communities that they live in. So I accepted the position and started part-time, and I started coming up here to the church. You were there, you remember. Mm-hmm. And got to know like Jared and you and Nick and Sean and Dale, all the staff members. Got to know you guys, got to work with Adam for a few months, mm-hmm. and which, by the way, Adam is something else. Yeah. I think he was in a point of, shifting, and that shifting point is tough to be present in two places. Mm-hmm. So some days he was present here, but some days he was present mentally somewhere else, mm-hmm. Just because there's so much different going on in his life, and he was moving to Africa, and it's a big deal. And so, but he's doing awesome there. He's doing awesome work there. And I'm really thankful for him and just how he was involved in my spiritual journey and in my, ultimately in my path here to where I am now. I think Adam is a key player in my eventual ending up on staff here at a church, having a job waiting for me before I had even graduated. I hadn't even graduated when I accepted the position, which that's a rare occurrence and a risky occurrence. That's, if you run a business, you don't typically take a chance on a leadership role with a student who hasn't graduated, because I don't have ministry experience. I did summer camp teams and a few internships, but that's not, I wouldn't call that experience leading a ministry. So for an organization to take a chance on me, I felt like there was this stigma. It was kind of self-imposed. It was never explicitly mentioned to me, but I imposed it on myself that said I had to be X, I had to be something for them when I walked in that door. So that's kind of what it was like to go from, high school to college to into this profession. There was never really a break, it feels like. So for the last 8 or so years, it's felt like go, go, go. And it's been, I think it's aged me. I found a few gray hairs the other day. So
just give it a few more years. Trust me, you'll.
I imagine so. I imagine.
Yeah. So I understand. So, some of that, and I've had some of those experiences, and some of it's been different for me. But one of the things that's unique is to go from that moment in college into full-time vocational ministry. All of a sudden you're in charge of the spiritual direction of not only kids but families, and you're taking a part of that journey with families here at the church, and in a way that is unique and has its own challenges and expectations. And yet, what was it like? What were some of the, in your first year, what were some of the expectations you had? What were some of, the highs and the lows of ministry? Like, I expected it to be this way and it's not, or, this really cool thing happened and I didn't expect it to. What's that been like in the first year?
Well, boy, let me tell you, it still feels like I'm in that first year because let me just say right now, I don't want to say that COVID is one of my unexpecteds because everybody's saying that. So I'm going to exclude COVID happening as an unexpected thing happening to me in my ministry. So just saying that right off the bat. But so, I mean, some highs, definitely. One of the highest moments I think we've experienced, and this goes beyond me, this goes into the church as a whole, is VBS last year. That for me was like a moment of affirmation that I knew some things that could transform some lives here at the church, or I knew how to excite some people about things or get people committed to an idea. And for me, that was a big morale boost because I just come out of one of the lows, which was the first week I had Wednesday night on my own. That was a low because, and this is such a bad ministry mindset, but because I had an expectation of, well, Adam and I had just had X number of students last week. So that means this week I'm going to have X number of students because it's just a week later. And the only thing that's changing is Adam's not going to be here. So in my mind, I had an expectation. And to walk into that youth building and to not have the number I was expecting, or to not have the participation I was expecting, and to have those difficulties was a real blow to my confidence because I felt like, wow, what did I do? Like, what did I do or what did I not do that ran students off? And so that was a tough week to swallow. I went home that night and I was like, maybe I'm not the person for this job. Maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe they should have gone with somebody else. And it took me a little bit to kind of get past that feeling. And let's see, another high would definitely have to be Trunk and Treat. That was fun because I got to just participate, and students were participating, and I didn't have to hover over them to keep them involved. They were doing what I asked of them without having to just like micromanage them. They understood what I desired and what I was trying to communicate with them, which isn't like my purpose. I'm not trying to communicate like my agenda. I'm trying to communicate what I believe Christ communicates to us through Scripture. And a big word for my ministry mindset is servanthood. Jesus was a servant leader. He told people how to go and help people, but he also went and did it. And I think his doing of that ministry is what had a bigger impact than his telling of how to serve. So for me, being an example of servanthood is a big deal, and teaching students how to serve others, because you may not know the intricacies of holiness. You may not know the doctrine of holiness, but you can go and help your brother or sister. You can bring them food. You can bring them water and give them a place to stay, no matter who you are. So in my mind, that's what I'm trying to convey to students. And when they caught on to that, and I saw them at Trunk and Treat serving kids, helping kids, being with kids, and I didn't have to tell them to do those things, that was a big win for me. So definitely a high. And I think another high has to be our senior night we had a few weeks ago in May, when we had a drive-in graduation for the students who had graduated this past year and celebrated them. To see those seniors who, I may have only been their youth leader for 1 year, but I've seen them for longer than that. Because I was around for the last 4 years before I started here. So I had seen them for 5 or so years. So getting to see them graduate and where they started and where they ended up, it's kind of crazy how quickly those things change. Especially because now, when I started here at Grace as a volunteer, I was with the 6th grade boys. This year, they're seniors. And that is a scary thought, because one of the boys said to me last week or the week before, he was like, dude, you've been here for like 6 years. You know that, right? And I was like, dang, 6 years of my life have been in Bartlesville. And that's a crazy thought, because it feels like just yesterday that I moved here. So definitely highs and lows. They come and go. And there was one night in last October, I think it was really stormy that night. And at one point the power went out in the building on a Wednesday night. And people were already asking me, are you going to have youth tonight? Like, maybe you shouldn't, because the rain and the weather is so blah, blah, blah. What if the building gets washed away? And I had already had doubts about having a youth group. And I was like, we're going to meet and have 3 people show up. So we were in the youth building. We were practicing, getting ready for Wednesday night, and then the power goes out in the youth building. I'm like, well, great. I think the power's out there at the whole building. So I took the students that I had with me and moved them into the atrium, and the power came on eventually. So we were getting close to time to start, and I had parents texting me and calling me left and right, and I couldn't think straight. So it was looking like a low. It was looking like this moment of failure and this moment of bad decision making, where I felt like, wow, I misled students and I made some parents angry tonight because they just dropped their kid off and now they're going to come pick them up again. And I was like, this just doesn't feel, what am I supposed to, I had no idea what to do. Like, do I tell them to call their parents to come pick them up and send every kid that shows up home, or what? And so what I did, we walked into the atrium and I said, guys, stay here for a second. I need to go grab something. And I just walked down the hallway all the way to the other end. I had no idea where I was going, but I was praying as I was walking, and I was saying, listen, God, I don't know what's going on tonight, and I don't know what to do. I need you to take over right now. And at that very instant, he gave me an idea, like right there. He said, he told me to go and grab one of the TVs out of one of the rooms, W rooms or E rooms. I don't know where it was. He said, grab a TV, roll it into the worship center. And so I did. I rolled it into the worship center. I hooked my computer to it, and we did worship right there in the worship center. So we had Josh play his guitar, Trey play his cajon, and Kate and I think Lana sang. And we did worship in the worship center with the TV. And that night went from questionable to felt like horrible to one of the most intimate spiritual nights we've had as a youth group. And it felt like this moment of releasing my ministry and letting God do what he's going to do with these students and what he's going to do with me in this position. And I think that might be one of the highest moments. And it's one that I definitely call back to a lot of times when I'm, in the midst of a decision or in the midst of a Wednesday night and I need something to motivate me or to put me on track. I call back to that night and to that prayer of, God, I need you to do something right now because I don't know what it is and I don't know what the answer is. So, yeah, for sure, there have been highs, there have been lows, and I still feel like this first year hasn't ended. And honestly, I don't feel like this first year will end until next summer. That feeling of still my first year here and I'm still new to this. Yeah. Because there's so many things we didn't get to do as a group. So for sure, I think everyone's first year in ministry is crazy. I think that any youth pastors out there who started this past year, it was your first year of youth ministry, I'm praying for you because it was hard. Yeah. It was very hard.
They, sometimes you hear things like, if you're doing ministry, and this could be true of any job, I'm sure, and you're stepping into a role, it can take, 5 years to start affecting change or 5 years to build trust with the people that you're working with. For you, having someone who had been doing it for, over 8 years and had an established position in that role, and all of a sudden you are stepping in to something where, Adam was synonymous with youth ministry at Grace Community Church, not just here in the church, but in the community as well. And so, what were some of the things that you've done, some of the people that you've spent time with to, help reorient yourself when you feel those expectations? And what do you try to do when you feel like, I think people are wanting to me to be Adam more than they want me to be who I am. And so how do you, deal with some of those things?
So I told you about how that first week I led youth on the Wednesday night, it felt like I'd failed or I wasn't the person for the job. And I think it was because of this underlying expectation, like you said, that I was supposed to be Adam. And, Sean and Rod had said explicitly, you're not Adam, and we're not asking you to be. And, it's good to hear that from them, but, that's not the same reality as the students I'm dealing with right then. When you walk in on a Wednesday night and you try to wrangle them and get them to move in a certain direction, and one of them just yells, I miss Adam. Where's he? Bring Adam back. I'm sick of you. That feels great. But, they're teenagers. They don't, I can't let teenagers be where I get my value from because they're so fickle. And the second I say something they don't like, they hate me. So, and that's just youth ministry. But for me, there are certain people in and around me that kind of keep me grounded. One of those people is Addie, my girlfriend, who definitely puts up with my whining the most. And I'm very sorry, Addie, if you're listening to this. I apologize for all my whining and complaining. But she for sure keeps me grounded. She's not afraid to tell me after a Wednesday night, hey, what was that? Why were you doing what you were doing? But she'll also tell me, hey, you did really good tonight. Because she's a leader for us, and she's been a leader, so she knows what it looks like to be present in a youth setting. So she's for sure a big voice of reason. And when I'm off track, I know I can rely on her to say, hey, what are you doing? Another person is Elaine Starkey. She's been a leader for us for the last year, and I think she started out as hesitant, like, I don't want to, teenagers, no, I don't want to deal with that. But she's morphed into almost like a guiding force. Like she has expectations, but they're good expectations. Like, hey, why aren't we connecting with students in this way? What is keeping us from doing this? So she asks those questions. She challenges me for sure. And there was one time, it was a Thursday, so we had just had youth, and it was the next day. She came into the office to see Jared or something, and she stopped by my office on the way. She walked in. She's like, I just have a question for you. And I was like, yeah, what is it? And I was worried because I was like, Elaine will tell me what's up. She'll say what's on her mind. And she was like, why did you say that about yourself last night? And I was really confused. I was like, say what? What did I say last night? And she's like, why did you say, and I think I said something to the effect of, I know I'm not Adam. She's like, why did you bother saying that? And I was like, I don't really know. She's like, stop it. She's like, we know you're not Adam, and no one's asking you to be Adam. She said, they want to see Daniel, so give them what they want. And since then, I've kind of had that stigma of be Adam started to fade. And eventually, every once in a while, it kind of pops its head up. Because there are definitely things he did well that I don't do well. But there are other things I do well that he didn't do well. So there's a give and take there. But for sure, Elaine, Addie, and Elmo Joseph has been another voice of reason when it comes to what I'm bringing to students in terms of words and examples and planning. Elmo is pretty foundational in that because he guides my mentality, I think. When I think about what the students might need or what Jesus wants me to tell the students, he's usually the person who's like in my ear. Even if we're not in person, he's in my head saying things that are relevant to my planning. So when we talk about, in a few weeks, we're talking about having a spirit of power, love, and sound judgment, and not a spirit of fear in the midst of any trials or tribulation, that idea came from Elmo. He's the one who put that idea in my head, that in the midst of COVID, in the midst of pandemics, in the midst of death, in the midst of hardships or trials or tribulation, we have not been given a spirit of fear, but we have been given a spirit of power, love, and sound judgment. So I think those three people have been foundational in my ministry, my planning, my mental well-being, my mindset, all of these things. They come from these three people and their ability to pour into my life in different ways and different avenues. Addie and I have the more intimate relationship, and that's where she comes from. Elmo and I have intimacy in a different way. And then Elaine and I have this more professional and objective. Our objective is to tell these kids about Jesus. Yeah. So she keeps me on that track. So for sure, those are people who helped me move through this stigma. And it ultimately did have to come down to myself, because people can tell you the right things all the time, right? When you step into this position, people can say you're doing whatever. But ultimately, if I'm not thinking that way, if I'm having that internal struggle with myself, there's nothing anyone can do about that. So if I had to say something, I think I've had to mature very quickly, and probably a lot quicker than most people my age, because the things I have to give up in order to be effective are huge. Like, sure, I would love to go hang out with friends on a Friday night, but that Friday night, I might have to meet with a student, just one student, because they're having a hard time. Or that Friday night might have to be spent planning for the next 3 months because it needs to happen. Or that Friday night might need to be whatever. So there are things I've had to sacrifice or give up. I could be up late playing video games, but I'm not going to be prepared for the next day or for the week or for the Wednesday or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So giving up certain things for the ministry, for God's work, has been something that I've been having to do a lot of, and it sucks. And Jared and I have had these conversations of, when you choose to be in ministry, you accept the fact that your Christmases don't exist because there's people looking to you to be their spiritual leader on a Christmas. Your Easter is spent serving, not spent enjoying the music. There's events that happen, and you're responsible for bringing that leadership, not somebody else. You're not in that position of sitting in the pew looking at the pastor, seeing what he's doing, but instead you're standing with the pastor and serving in whatever capacity he's asked you to serve in.
Mm-hmm.
So sacrifice has been huge. And Addie, I apologize. Be ready for lots of sacrifice. Because it's not like it just happens for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
It's every year.
Yeah.
And that's hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I like, some of the things you're talking about, the fact that realizing you can't do a lot of these things completely on your own, and allowing other people, whether it's Elmo or Elaine, to speak into something where you could easily take that and say, this is my ministry. I want it to be, I want to shape it, and I want it to represent me, or be, even to fall into the trap. I want it to be about me, or, I want to center it around, myself or my personality. And it's hard, and it takes some humility to allow someone else to kind of speak into that and say, no, it's about, X, Y, or Z, reorienting what you're doing, whether it's an activity or teaching, or the way it's shaped, just structurally on a Wednesday night. And that can be hard to do, especially when you feel like you're also at the same time trying to prove yourself to people who have different expectations for different reasons, whether or not they have kids in that ministry. And I'm sure, you've got stories about different things you've encountered of, the way some people may have suggested how to do certain things and how those are different. But moving from that aspect of it into, some of the things, what are some of the things, you're receiving some of the feedback from people, and learning, what does God want for the youth ministry that you're a part of, and what have been some of the things that you've, tried to do or wanted to do that looked different than they did before, or worked well, or maybe even some things that didn't work out and didn't work well that you tried, and what was it like to try some of those different things, or push for some things that have been different than what the students or the parents have experienced before.
Okay. Well, one of the very first things, and I had only been here not even a month, was VBS. There was this it felt like this air that said, when teenagers are here at VBS, they don't do any good because they just sit in the back and twiddle their thumbs and get on their phones. And, I was kind of ambitious, and I said, no, our students aren't going to do that. I didn't say I'm going to try not to get them to not. I said, no, they're not going to. I had this confidence of they're going to serve in a way that you might not believe right now. And, by God's grace, they did. The teenagers stepped up in gigantic ways that I couldn't have planned for.
Mm-hmm.
And they did awesome things. So that was really good. That was a moment of shattering expectation. And I definitely feel that air of, well, Daniel has to be, why isn't the youth ministry growing, Daniel? What are you doing? You're not working? you should be working. You're here at the church all the time. Why aren't there students showing up? And, there's been other times where things haven't worked out very well. Like, maybe it's scheduling service projects and students don't show up for those things. Like, that's one thing that might not work out very well. Sometimes it's planning a party and preparing for 60 students to show up and then getting 20. Like, do I see that as a failure? Well, I see that as my planning maybe was ambitious, but I don't see it as a failure because we had students show up. And I think one of the other things, I'm trying to remember, one of the other things I had in my brain was the breakfasts. When we did breakfast in the atrium, we served burritos to the congregation. I told the parents that were helping with that project, I said, listen, you better prepare for, X number of burritos. And there was this conversation going on, like, maybe that's a little bit too much. And, maybe we're being overambitious by that. And I said, I had to at some point swallow my pride and be okay with them having this planning because they're older than me and they've planned things like this before. So they have a better understanding of what to expect. And I was working more from a faith-based, God's going to move in this plan. And they were operating more from a realistic, hey, we've done this before and we don't want to be foolish. So, balancing those two things is very hard, especially when you're young and you feel like you can conquer the world. You kind of understand what that feels like. Looking at what you've done with the church in the last 4 months, you kind of feel like you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So, I swallowed my pride. We let the event happen, and I let them take control of it. And it ended up we sold every single burrito and didn't have one left over. And we sold our last burrito at the end of second service. So it was pretty good in terms of, preparation. They did a great job. There were a few ingredients we were under in, but that's okay. So I said, you know what? I'm glad I let them take over. But there's definitely been this big need to swallow any pride that I try to put forward. Because if I was very prideful, I'd get my feelings hurt at every second, or like you said, I wouldn't let people step into what's going on and it would be all about me and my ministry, which is a mindset that I never want to put forth because it's not my ministry. I'm not, like Jared said a few Sundays ago, I'm not qualified by anything I've done on my own. I'm only qualified by God who qualifies me. Rod's qualified by God who qualified him. We don't earn that qualification. I didn't earn this position. I was given it. And since I was given it, I want to treat it as such that anyone could be doing what I'm doing. Anyone could replace me. And I'm not some special whiz kid that got put in this position. I'm just a servant who was picked for this role and could easily be replaced by God if he wanted to. So treating this ministry as such helps with that humility and helps with keeping that mindset and mentality of it's not mine. Step back and let it be God's. And if God wants us to have a party this week, then we're going to have a party. If God wants us to do another message this week instead of having a party, that's what God wants. And this was something students and I had talked about recently, was who is our accepted leader over the youth group. If we are a team and a unit and a group united together to move together, who is our accepted leader of this group? And everybody raised their hand and they said it was me. And I said, you're absolutely wrong. It is not me. And I told him it's God. God is our leader. I'm just a voice he put in front of you. He could replace me with anybody. He could make any one of you sitting in that chair up here and that leader. But he is ultimately our leader. So when I tell them where we're going, it's not me saying that to them. It's God told me to tell them that. So thinking of myself as more of a mouthpiece than a source definitely helps with mentality and, being okay with some parents who disagree with the way I do things, which I don't blame them for disagreeing with me because I'm a dumb kid who's still trying to figure this stuff out. When I proposed an event and the parents like, well, maybe we should reconsider this. Maybe this event isn't, well planned or well thought out. I really try to step back and say, well, why are they saying that? And ask them questions. What is it that's making them uncomfortable about this idea or this plan? When we last year when we started proposing youth camp and I started announcing it to students, we didn't have a ton of students jump on board right away. And I think it's a hesitancy from parents and students about the camp we're going to. Because I had a lot of parents say, why don't you just go to camp here in Oklahoma, 2 hours away? Or why don't you go to Table Rock or Kanakuk or something like that? They're right there. And in my mind, I'm like, no, I think we need to have something different. And the more I talked about it, they kind of bought into it and they began to trust me, which I know I still have a long way to go when it comes to earning trust of parents and students. But there have been a few that I think have kind of bought into what we do. And, some of those few, the Stapletons come to mind, but that's because I think that has to do with me knowing David Stapleton for a while and having conversations with him. He was also a leader for Adam. So we had conversations through that time, and they sat in on my interviews. When I was being interviewed for the position, they were in some of those interviews on Monday nights. And so talking with David and also getting to know Macy and getting Macy to open up to the youth group and participate in what was going on, I think was huge. It was a huge win for myself and for this ministry and for my credibility. When I present these crazy things to parents, I have somebody on my team. And it shouldn't be about getting parents to like me, but at some point they have to be okay with what I'm saying or what I'm doing. They have to know my heart behind these things, which is why I'm trying to make things like parent nights where I sit down with just the parents and talk to them about my mission and my vision for our group and be very explicit about those things. So, there are so many things I still have to learn about being a youth leader. Like I still don't know what the best way to communicate things to parents is. Emails work. Well, not everybody gets an email.
Yeah.
Do text messages work better? Well, not everyone will respond to a text message from me. I have leaders who don't text me back. Will a social media post work? Well, maybe sometimes. Some parents are more receptive to those things than others.
Yeah.
So, and especially when you get into students, just because students are on social media doesn't mean that they're following or they care about anything that I'm posting. Because I'm not like the hip, cool, trendy thing going on Instagram, right? I'm not doing TikTok dances on Instagram, so they don't really care about what I have to say.
Well, when you figure it out, let me know, because I would love to figure out how I can communicate better. And there's a lot of things, that you talk about that. I think if you're doing ministry, if you're doing anything as a job or career, you learn and you grow, and there's always room to improve. And I think it's important to allow that, and then also to have goals for yourself, to not, feel like, well, I've figured it out, or this is what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to dig my heels in and really stick with it. And at the end of what you were saying, you mentioned some of the things with social media and communication and online, kind of dovetailing off of that, and you had referenced COVID a little bit, but what was it like? Everyone, especially in the church world, had to learn how to do different things. And I think everyone, is still learning and figuring out and growing in how they, communicate best to the people that God's put in their charge. What was it like for you when all of that first started and people were staying home, and you had to learn how to engage with students differently than you had before?
So this kind of goes off of a little bit of my background in education. So in middle school, way back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, it feels like, in middle school, we did these projects in my gifted and talented program. And we had to make PowerPoints and videos and act and do lines and edit and all these other things. We did all these things and had to present them at a technology conference in Philadelphia. We got a trip out of it. We got to get out of school for like a whole week. We were in Philadelphia. We flew up there. It was awesome. And we got to like walk around and see all these different tech gurus like Google and Apple were there. And we got to see all these products, and they gave us pencils, and they're really cool pencils. I wish I still had them. But, you know, in that process, I learned a lot about video editing, much more than the average middle school student. And even today, much more than most people would know beyond just like iMovie. And I've always been this learner. I've always been this kind of person who I kind of know a little bit about something, but if I'm going to really do it, I want to know more and be developed in that thing. You kind of get what that's like. So when COVID started shutting things down, I said, well, I want to communicate with the students in a way, but also make something that could extend beyond students. So it's like, it was made for students, but you know, their mom and dad listening as well could get something out of it too. So I just took my message format that I had been doing on Wednesday nights, and I put it into a video where I, you know, recorded myself. I had a microphone like this in front of me. I spoke into it. I had a message prepared. I went through my message, went through my points, tried to illustrate it with text and images and make this video that was hopefully engaging and short, and then put it out online and hope for the best. And in between, trying to do fun things, you know, like the coronavirus TikToks we made, and doing those things to just kind of keep the mood light in the midst of this time that just felt like everything sucks. So trying to balance, you know, spiritual leadership, but also lightheartedness wasn't easy. And I'm not going to say I did a fantastic job, but I am going to say that I tried. And I'm okay with being able to say I tried my best in the midst of that situation. So, you know, I feel like reaching teenagers at some point, you have to know what they care about. It's really hard to get teenagers to care about what you care about if they think you have no idea what they like, which is why I created a Grace Students TikTok account, because I knew that's where most of our students were. You know, whether or not they would admit to it, they watched TikToks or they had seen a TikTok before. They were on Instagram already. They're not really on Facebook. Students, I know you're not on Facebook anymore. I get it. That's the old people social media thing. It's very boomer, I know. But, you know, it was these three platforms that I felt we were best propped up on to be shown to students. So I kind of went for it. You know, I never dabbled into YouTube because setting up a YouTube channel and then getting students to like the YouTube channel is really difficult. I mean, you're experiencing that.
Yes.
So, you know, I also didn't want to, because in my mind, I'm like, this isn't going to be a forever thing. And I'm not going to put the energy into this thing that I probably won't be doing in 6 months. And here we are, and we're not doing videos every week anymore. I do a video occasionally. It's more lighthearted, but also trying to communicate a point. But we're meeting again on Wednesday nights. So I don't have to make that video, which is part of why I didn't buy into and totally sell out to the online thing. I just kind of did my best to get us through that time. So, yeah, I mean, COVID made everything complicated. And the hardest part, I think, for me was feedback. You know, every once in a while, I would get a comment from a parent that said, "Hey, Daniel, thank you for what you're doing, and thank you for being consistent." And, you know, it was just hard to feel like what I was doing actually mattered. And it made it really easy to feel like I should just stop.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think I haven't been afraid of getting sick when it comes to COVID. I'm young and healthy enough that if I get sick, I'm going to be home for a week or so and then I'll be back. But when it comes to the mental aspect of quarantine, of breaking up youth groups, of being separated from people I care about, that took a much heavier toll on me than the actual illness did, which I still, I go out and eat at restaurants, I go to Walmart, I go here, there, everywhere, anywhere that'll let me in, I'll go. And I haven't felt sick once. There was one time, I don't know if it was COVID or if it was an allergic reaction, but I did have to stay home for 2 weeks because I called Aaron Hightower and I said, hey, I'm having these symptoms and they kind of coincide with what COVID is, but I don't know if it is COVID or not. And he said, better safe than sorry, stay home for 2 weeks in quarantine. And I did. And I'm pretty sure I almost gave Addie a heart attack because she wasn't here. She was in Kansas where she's from. And she sent home because the college closed. And so I was by myself in my apartment, and I was going stir crazy. I was running around, the walls were getting smaller and they were moving and talking to me. And that was like the worst experience of my life, was being stuck in my apartment for 2 weeks. And it's just this feeling of my ministry doesn't exist. When your audience feels like can just ignore you very easily, it's like, well, what's the point? And I imagine this is something that content creators on YouTube struggle with, is this feeling of, does my work matter? Because you're putting yourself out there. When you make a video and you make a podcast and when you record it and you edit it and you put time into it and then you put it out there for people to watch and to respond to, you're putting yourself out there, and a lot of times you're setting yourself up to be ignored. And it hurts when it happens that way. And that was a lot of what I was feeling. I was feeling hurt because I'm putting myself out there every single week at the same time in the same way and nothing. And, it's that pain started to get dull after a while. And it was just a point of, I'm just going to stop. And we need to push for Wednesday nights in person again. And making that decision was hard. It was really hard. And starting off with our senior night, that's how we kind of began meeting again, was through that senior night and testing the waters to see who really cares about being together, who wants to be here, who wants to see their friends. And going from there was kind of what led us to where we are now, where we've met the last 7 or so weeks. We're meeting again tonight, and we're meeting again next week, and blah, blah, blah. So, definitely, COVID made my mentality worsen over that time, and it was very hard for me to be okay with that. It was very hard for me to feel like I had a purpose in ministry. And I'm still kind of feeling that effect because it's still affecting our numbers, it's still affecting our attendance, it's still affecting our participation. But, low numbers, I have to remember, aren't my fault. Low numbers are not a result of me doing something wrong, but low numbers are instead a byproduct of fear in the midst of a pandemic.
Yeah. One of the things that you talked about, I appreciate, is it's the fact that, you were willing to try different things. I think that during this time, and when I've talked to people, the resistance to change hasn't been great, because what this has done is it's forced people to change, either change the way they operate, change their mindset. Even, for us, there's a lot of things that we're doing normally, even on a Sunday, doesn't look the same. The numbers and ultimately at the end of the day, it's not about the numbers and it's not about that stuff. It's, are we communicating the gospel to the people that need it? Are we, doing the things that we've been called to do, and being willing to be fluid in how you're presenting things or where you're presenting things, or to even make it more about what is God calling me to do in this moment, and is it different than what I want to do, and is that okay? And to admit that it's not always easy, and there's there's the struggle there, and everyone, whether or not they want to admit it, is struggling in different ways with this, and not having the control that they're used to having. And, it's something that I don't think is going away anytime soon. And, we'll continue to have to adjust. And I'm sure that you're going to, continue to adjust even if COVID wasn't happening, going into, 2, 3, 5 years of ministry, God sometimes calls you to be fluid and adaptable in those moments. And that can be hard. That can be hard to do, especially when you want to do certain things. And so, just encouraging to hear you, admit to kind of going through some of that, and, be honest about some of those things. As we kind of, finish and wrap up things, what else, would you like to say, maybe if there's a parent, a student, someone that's listening, or watching, what would you say to them? Maybe like, what do you want to see happen for Grace students, in this next year, 2021? And what's your hope, for the next few years of what you're doing?
I guess to the parents involved, to the students involved, the biggest thing that I see is students leave their home, they leave to college, they go off to somewhere different, and they have no idea what it means to have a personal relationship with Jesus, because their entire life is built around what mom and dad have said about Jesus to me, and I've never thought about it otherwise, And to parents, what I want to say is it's so very, very, very important to be involved in your child's spiritual life. I'm not a babysitter who is paid to take care of your kid on a Wednesday night. I'm a spiritual leader trying to guide them in the way that Jesus wants them to go. The other part of that is that you have the responsibility of Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. I have Wednesday and sometimes Sunday. But those other 5 days, and even Monday, and even Sunday and Wednesday, I only have an hour. And the reality is that 1 hour on those days is not enough to change a spiritual life. That is not enough to build a relationship on. You don't marry a person because you talk to them 1 hour a week. When you and Amy got married, you didn't talk for 1 hour a week before you decided you wanted to propose to her, did you?
No.
Yeah, exactly. You guys talk more than that. And Elmo brought up this thing with me last week that was really interesting. He said that marriage illustration that we see in the Bible between Jesus and the church, we think that that's a reflection of our marriage, when man and woman. He said we have it backwards. Our marriage is reflecting what it is like when Jesus marries the church. That is the example for us, not the other way around. So we're reflecting Christ through that. And so it's a relationship aspect. Teenagers need to have a relationship with Jesus. Otherwise, every single time somebody walks into their life and sounds like they know what they're talking about, they're going to change their views. They can say or think they know what they're talking about all the time if they want to. But the reality is they have no idea. They don't know what they're talking about. They like to think that they do, but they don't. I don't know what I'm talking about sometimes. And if we are not teaching them how to cultivate a relationship with Christ, then they're going to be so lost when they leave here. In 5 years, we're going to have so many people move out of the church, and all of these teenagers that came out of youth groups moving into church with families. And that's a scary thought, that they're transitioning from these programs and filling the church pews. But how much do they know about the scripture? How much do they know about the Bible? What do they actually know about Christ? And sometimes it's nothing because they've never thought about those things. They're just at church because mom and dad told them they had to be at church all the time. So to parents, take ownership in your child's spiritual life. Be a part of those things. If your child is asking questions, be present, answer those questions. And also your spiritual disciplines that you're practicing, I hope you're practicing, practice them in front of them. where they can see you, because that will matter to them. One of the biggest things that's impacted my spiritual life was my dad prayed with me every single morning before we went to school. We would get in his truck and we would go get ready to go to school, but before we pulled out of the driveway, we would look at each other and we would pray. And I would pray first, and then he would pray. And we would pray over things happening that day, pray over family, pray over church things, all these other things. And I still remember that. That was before I was 16 when I started driving myself. And even when I started driving myself, I would still pray at my truck. So parents, your influence is bigger than you think it is. And it's more potent than mine will be. Okay, you may think, well, my kid hates me and doesn't care about, they just roll their eyes at me every time I talk to them. But the reality is that they're watching you. They're learning from you. And what mom and dad do, they're going to do. You have a gigantic impact on these students. And if you and I both understand our responsibility to them in their spiritual life, then we're going to make gigantic changes even in the next year. And I think right now we're in pandemic still, I think. We haven't ended. This is a time more than ever that these students need to see somebody rooted in godliness, rooted in a spiritual relationship with Christ, rooted in truth, and not rooted in what one news station says versus another news station, but instead rooting ourselves in Christ and being an example of that, I think is what serves them better than anything. So if there's a parent watching or listening who wants to know how to involve, how to deepen the spiritual life of their teenager, that's my answer. If you want to do a justice to your student, that is my answer. Live out a spiritual life for them to see, and then come alongside them when they have these questions, have these conversations, address these hard issues. And if you can't address those hard issues, then you have a responsibility to deepen your relationship with Christ so that you can lead your family in the way that they should go. So yeah, I think for the next, 3 years, they're all going to be about setting a foundation. Because if Grace Students has no foundation to stand on, we can't go anywhere. And when we try to go somewhere, when we try to come back to what we were doing, we have nothing left because there's no foundation holding anything together. So in my mind, we have to set this foundation of we are a group. We are called to love God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and we are called to love our brothers and sisters as ourselves. And that is our mission as Grace Students. And that is my mission, to help them know Christ and to know what he wants for them and know how to live it out to the people around them. And by being an example that they can look at. And those are things I think are foundational to any ministry's success, not just a youth group, any ministry. Because if your spiritual leader has no grounds for what they're saying or has no relationship of their own to speak from, then what is the point of anything that they're trying to teach you? So in terms of where Grace Students is going, we're going to know God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and we're going to live it out to the people around us. And that's something that they'll take with them everywhere that they go. And through that foundation, they will hopefully begin to cultivate the deeper parts of the relationship. They will know what it means to seek Christ, and they will know how to know Jesus on their own. And I won't have to hold their hand the whole time. But they'll become mature and complete, lacking nothing. And so that's what I want. I want to produce mature Christians. They won't be mature right off the bat, I know that. But eventually, I want them to be at a point where they can say, I know Christ, and I know maturity and spirituality. And those are the things that I see in my ministry here at Grace, and also in whatever ministry I end up at after my time here is done.
Well, for any of you still listening, highly encourage you, reach out to Daniel, reach out to Nick, reach out to different people that are leading these ministries. As the church, we can't do any of these things by ourselves. We can try to lead as much as we want, but we are all in this together as one body, and to really be the church the way God wants us to be, we have to do it together. And knowing a little bit about what it's like to try and be a part of kids ministry and youth ministry, it's hard when you only have a limited amount of time and you can only invest so much time into one student And when you've got, 20, 30, 50, 100 other people that also, need that relationship. And so if you, don't know where to start, you don't know how to, start talking about these things or be involved, with your kids or your students, just reach out to us, email Daniel, call us, meet with us, and we'll try our best to help. And no one can do any of these things perfectly, but we can do it together better than we can apart. Daniel, thank you again for coming on and talking about some of this stuff and what it's been like. And I'm sure, a year from now, there's going to be lots of new experiences and things and lows and highs and, regrets and aspirations. For people who are listening or watching, where can they find stuff that Grace Students is doing?
Yeah, so our primary outreach centers, I guess I would call them, are our Facebook and Instagram pages. On Instagram, we are Grace Students Beeville, and on Facebook, we have a page that's Grace Students Beeville at GS Beeville, and those are our primary sources. When I make a video or an announcement or share something about our group or about what we're doing, that's where I put them. That's where I announce them. I send them through there. I try to communicate with parents who are in our system directly through email. If you want information that I share or things I talk about, or you want to know about these things or see a message or any of these things, email is a great way for me to share those things. I can email you a sermon that's written out. I can email you a video. I can send you things that I'm using to cultivate a relationship with these students. So email is a great way to communicate with me, but also our Instagram and our Facebook pages at Grace Students Beeville, at GS Beeville. And yeah, I think that's probably the best way to get in touch with me. Send us a message, DM us, contact us, comment on our posts, anything, like them, share them, do what you need to do to get my attention. And I will do my best to serve you in whatever capacity you are asking or seeking. And also make sure you check out our merch. We're selling Grace drink cups for 5 cents a piece. We require orders of 60 or more. So
maybe one of these days. And if you are wanting to follow our church online, you can find us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, at GCC Bartlesville. You can find us on YouTube. You can find more stories, conversations like these at looking for Grace Stories, wherever you listen to podcasts, on our YouTube channel. And please, I'm trying to say this more, give us reviews online, like, comment, subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you haven't, we're putting stuff out, as those things grow, we'll be able to do more things. I have more ideas for things we can be doing. And you can find links to all of that stuff and everything else, like our email addresses and sermons, on our website, gccbartlesville.org. Thank you again for listening, watching, sharing, and we will talk to you next week.
bye.